Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. I'm joining you to speak geopolitics with you. We're going to touch on Ukraine. It's not a huge amount about Ukraine, but there's quite a bit about Greenland, a little bit about Venezuela, quite a lot about tech and what the agendas might be underwriting some of these international shenanigans, should I say. So on and so forth. But just thank you very much for being here. I'm wearing a t-shirt that Pierre sent me, Ukposhta, in solidarity with the postal services out in Ukraine who do such a incredible job. Thanks. In fact, I think Pierre sent me this cap as well. So Pierre's just, and he sent me this Ukraine band. So in fact, this episode is sponsored by Pierre, who is a wonderful human being helping out Ukraine as and when he can. So thank you guys for being here. I love some of the comments already. Waiting for this live stream. Watch Starfleet Academy or wait for the ATP live stream, my own version of the trolley problem. So that's Wizard of Ooze. Greg Nitsky says, folks, it seems Jonathan has a chat scheduled for tomorrow about his book. It seems drink every time he mentions Ukraine. So this is on my other channel, ATP Atypical Philosopher, where I'm going to talk about a book that I am just putting the finishing touches on with my co-author. We're editing it, and we're being interviewed by my friend Critical Faculty. So if you're interested in sort of looking at historical feasibility of things like the Exodus account from the Bible, come and check that out. As a skeptic, I'll be giving you an insight into some of the anachronisms and whatnot in there. But anyway, people have been saying, well, drinking game, drink every time he mentions Ukraine, Doris, and a shot of whiskey every time he has a rant. So yeah, come and join in. I will endeavor to keep you drinking. Okay, so thank you for being here. We are going to be talking about an awful lot of stuff tonight. I originally had this video to be an entire live stream on ICE. I was going to call it ICE Crazy, because so much is going on to do with that. And actually, it is a huge conversational topic or discussion topic. I still have all that ready and waiting to go. It's too much to fit into this video. I was considering whether to do half and half. I'm going to do a separate ICE video because it has an awful lot of ramifications. It's also really reflective of stuff that's going on in the United States in general, and it's quite a wide-ranging video. But I'm just trying to work out when I have time to do that, because tomorrow is super busy from a personal point of view, and I would normally stack that up for tomorrow afternoon, but I've got to sort out things with my parents, and I've got to go and watch the next installment of the 28 years later. Although it's not Danny Boyle, he didn't direct this next one. He directed the first of the new ones, and they filmed them broadly at the same sort of time. And this second one is out close on the heels of the last one. So anyway, that's what I'm doing tomorrow night, and I might not have time to do a live, but yes, I'll try and fit that in at some point. It is an important video. I really do think so. Okay, so where are we going to start tonight? Let's go to Putin, because he is fairly important in all matters pertaining to Ukraine. Benny Pye is in the background. He's hopefully curating a few questions. So if you have anything particularly pertinent to say, Benny Pye might catch it. Okay, now let's just do the usual reminders. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. It makes a difference to the channel. It helps to grow the channel so the message gets out there, but it also keeps you in a loop. Thank you to all those subscribers who are already a part of this, and also very much to the members. Thank you so much for being members here. It's really, really generous. Okay, we are going to now have a look at international geopolitics. So here we have Putin making a speech today. Peskov was talking about how Putin was going to make an important geopolitical speech today, and it's the usual kind of stuff. In his speech, Putin mentioned international law and said that all countries in the international community must abide by it, which is hilarious. I'd love to just be sitting in that audience and burst out sort of fake laughing. Oh, Putin. Oh, man. I just like, and all the cameras are swinging around. I'd be like, that's just, I mean, he just mentioned international law. Did you guys did you hear that? Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Only because, Russia, invaded Ukraine. And, anyway, I'd end up in the gulag, but I'd like to do that. And then sometimes I imagine I could do things and then have a machine that I could just rewind time, just do something outrageous, knowing that I could rewind time and just then not do it. Anyway, it's obvious that this comment from Putin doesn't apply to Putin himself. He is nothing if not an incredible hypocrite. Okay, moving on. Let's go now to this. Now, this is from a source that isn't like some big reputable source. It's just a rando to do often actually makes comments on gains or losses on the front. But actually, I need to look into this because this is something I've been talking about geopolitically for an awful long time. And I've talked about how, in some senses, China doesn't really mind who wins or loses in the Ukraine conflict, because if Russia loses, they'll help themselves to to Russian, well, you could argue to Manchurian places that maybe once were Chinese, and also to Russian natural resources and so on and so forth. Provenance of this, question it, but the claim here is that Russian Z bloggers, so Russian war bloggers, are claiming that China has now effectively, functionally taken over a large part of Russia's Far East. China is now allegedly earning taxes from the areas from Chita all the way to Vladivostok, with a large Chinese population now residing there. There were claims that China had been given special dispensation to use this port of Vladivostok recently as well, I reported on. So yeah, a bit of history. Large parts of what is now Russia's Far East were annexed by the Russian Empire in 1858 to 1860 under unequal treaties with China. Modern Russia is trying to force Ukraine to agree to an unequal treaty and cede territory. The Chinese want that back. And I don't know about the provenance and the accuracy of these claims, but it wouldn't surprise me at all, a bit of a slow creep going on there, that the Russians would be ill-equipped to deal with. The Chinese could very easily help themselves to parts of Russia, and Russia would not be able to do anything about it. They are stretched to the max. So that is, I think, something to watch out for there. Right. A lot of people have been saying Russian allies, as in Iran, Venezuela, etc., are calling it a paper tiger for lack of support when they really needed it. This is a Bloomberg article. Russia's allies complained Putin was nowhere when it mattered most. And this is absolutely true. Like, they were supporting Venezuela militarily, selling equipment to Venezuela, training Venezuelan soldiers, and, getting Venezuela to support them in the United Nations. The same with Iran, all this kind of stuff. Buying stuff off Iran, buying stuff off Venezuela, to and fro. But when push comes to shove, it looks like Russia is unable possibly to just do anything about these nations taking a hit from, in the case of Venezuela, the US, and in the case of Iran, from their own protesters, but also with strikes from the US again and Israel previously. So Russia is showing itself to be the paper tiger that many people are saying it is. As Putin focuses on Ukraine, his strategic allies around the world feel abandoned in Venezuela after the successful kidnapping of Maduro. Their relationship with Moscow is now seen as a paper tiger. 100%. They are not alone. Over the past 13 months, authoritarian regimes that previously benefited from close ties with the Kremlin, from Damascus, of course, Syria. The same happened in Syria. From Damascus to Havana, have found themselves without Russian support when it mattered most. The operation against Maduro has angered the Kremlin, but his loss to Russia is not seen as a disaster. A source told Bloomberg. Putin, he said, is more concerned with preserving relationships with Trump. Iran also believes that the alliance with Russia has been futile. Wow, quote futile there. Now, we're going to move on to Greenland. The mask drops, says this person. And is that Edward Fazer? That's not. Oh my goodness. I've written essays against this guy. He's a Catholic philosopher. I've edited a book that was a deconstruction of Fazer's Aristotelian arguments on Thomas Aquinas as well. His arguments on. Oh, it doesn't matter. I could go and get your book that I edited that takes Fazer to task. I didn't realize. So anyway, this is interesting coming from Edward Fazer. Wow. Okay. I've written many hundreds of thousands of words, or certainly thousands of words, against Fee's positions. The mask drops, he says, which is interesting coming from him then, as a dyed-in-the-wool proper conservative. And the true motivation is admitted. Everything he says the US needs to own Greenland for can be done without owning it. So this is all the stuff we've been talking about in the last few days. Yet he stubbornly insists on owning it to the point of threatening war against an ally who has done us no harm, which would amount to murder, destroy our alliances, and thereby help Russia and China, and lead to an electoral disaster for the GOP, followed by impeachment. He is drunk on pride and vainglory. So reference here is to an article. Donald Trump says he wants ownership of Greenland because it's psychologically important to me. So yet again, we're talking about why Trump is actually interested in Greenland. And I've said, this we talked about this article when it came out. This is on the 12th. Trump explained the original article was a New York Times article. In an interview with the New York Times, why he won't just send more troops to Greenland to fend off foreign threats, which would be legal under a Cold War era agreement. But I think a lot can be understood of Trump in terms of legacy, getting old, mortality salience, wanting to increase the size of the United States territory, and ego. And because it's psychologically important for me is that kind of ego thing, that sense of legacy, the want to be an emperor. That's why he's going into Greenland. And in my video, my first video of the day was, or first or second, was about Greenland again, where he doesn't seem to be interested that the Danes and the Greenlanders are not wanting Greenland to be ceded, and Greenlanders themselves are saying we'd much prefer to stay with Denmark and the EU. He's like, don't really care. So he doesn't care for self-determination. He doesn't care about the people of Greenland. It's all about him. It's all about ownership of this area. But we're going to go on and talk a bit later about 2/3 of the way through this video about how we are starting to understand how big tech is playing a part with Greenland, which is something else I've said is hugely important. Do not underestimate it. And I think Trump is saying it is fine with invading Greenland. He doesn't really care, but the people around him, some of the people around him, are, I think, trying to curtail that from happening. The more sensible people in his administration, and of course, you've got Congress and the electorate in the United States clearly not being keen on the United States invading Greenland. But Trump himself doesn't give a damn. So I think he is fine with invading because he looks at what happened with Iran in July last year in the strikes on the nuclear facilities. He looks at Venezuela. He says, look, we can do these amazing military incursions and whatnot. We're fine. I have the wind by my sails. I'm cool with us just attacking Greenland. It doesn't matter. They're NATO allies. Don't really like NATO. Don't see the point of it. We're big enough to not need NATO. Europeans, they need us more than we need them. Sodom. Let's do this thing. And it's up to the people around him to go, well, he doesn't really mean that. What this is trying to jockey for position here. But no, he does mean it. So Trump means it. The other people try and post hoc rationalize that in a sense that he is trying to just get the Greenlanders and the Danes and Europe to the table so that he can just economically coerce it away from them. The end result is the same. This is like strong arming Europe in order to try and get control over Greenland. So then you've got this situation where and you can go and watch this. This isn't actually the video. This is a still from the video. But the Greenland minister, the one who was at the conference, at the meeting with the Americans, with Rubio and Vance, you had the foreign minister and her were in this meeting. She's then being interviewed about this and gets teary, which, as someone says, this says more than. Someone else was saying this interview says more than you could possibly want, in terms of any statement. The fact that she's kind of crying in public over what the United States is trying to do to Greenland as a Greenlander. Right, so the Greenland minister was moved to tears during an interview with KNR. Quote, the pressure has become even stronger. We are strong in the department and we work with all our might so that we in Greenland can live safely, said Vivian Motzfeldt, Greenland's Minister for Foreign Affairs. And yet, there she is sort of crying in public because of the pressure. My beloved country is on the edge of being invaded. Now, she was in a meeting where the foreign minister came out, the Danish foreign minister came out and said, Trump, his wish is for the conquering of Greenland. So all these people that say Trump he's not really interested, yet he is. The foreign minister has told you that they were unable to change the American position, and the American position is, or the Trump administration, or the Trump position is, that he wants to conquer Greenland. So anyone that's saying no, he doesn't really want to use military force, you are wrong. At least that's not what the people involved in this very decision-making process believe, right? And you might have American diplomats, you might have Rubio try and be sensible about it and try and change Trump's words for the public, but it is very clear, and he said it very openly, that you can do this the easy way, the hard way. We prefer economic coercion, but if you don't capitulate to American economic coercion, then you will capitulate to our military threats, and we will do it. Denmark has then, as I mentioned earlier, started deploying military equipment and advanced troops to Greenland. DR has reported, and so have other countries, Sweden, Germany, France, to a much smaller degree, the UK and a couple of other countries, Canada as well. An advanced command has already been sent to Greenland to prepare logistics and infrastructure for the possible arrival of larger Danish and Allied forces. Danish Air Force Challenger aircraft have already landed. And then we have, so the big thing here, and I think, so, okay, this is where it's all about joining the dots, and what I try and do for you guys, or at least for me, and then I speak to you about it, and you can disagree or whatever. But I think big tech is massively involved. I think essentially what you are seeing is the United States, and when I say United States, I mean the Trump administration. Of course, many great American viewers out there that don't agree with what the Trump administration is doing, of course. But you have, I think, big tech taking, gearing up for just a big protracted battle against anyone that would want to resist them in terms of regulation. And the United States is pitted against anyone who is against big tech. So the national security strategy looks very much like a marketing document on behalf of big tech, where the US sets out their foreign policy and security strategy as one that is aligned with exactly what big tech would want. And anyone that wants to regulate or tax the American tech industry is therefore up against the American military might and the American diplomatic might. And so you have Britain just against Elon Musk just now, and it looks like Britain has won at least the first battle in the war. But then we've got Palantir inside our NHS, we've got Palantir inside our MOD, and we've got the Reform looking like they're going to come to power, and Reform would not have stood up against Twitter and against Elon Musk. And so it's looking like if big tech plays the long game, they'll have Nigel Farage in their pocket and Reform will be in charge of the UK. At the same time, you've got big tech, and we're going to come on to this later because there's a fascinating Brussels Times article about this, but you've got big tech have been courting far right in the EU very overtly. And when I say big tech, I mean people like Meta, Mark Zuckerberg's Meta, have been meeting with the far right big time in Europe. And so the undoing of the EU is the unlocking of resistance to big tech. And the US is well on board with this. So this is part of trade deals. It's part of the diplomatic contesting that is going on at the moment between the EU and the United States. And like I said to you in the last live stream, you look at science fiction where they say, well, the world is just governed by 5 big corporations effectively. That's the way the world is going. This is an inflection point. Potentially, do we stand up to big tech and win, or do we roll over and have our bellies rubbed and big tech just starts taking control of all our lives algorithmically and politically, and the lack of regulation and so on and so forth? And what you appear to have is wrapped up with the resistance to big tech is the idea of the EU is standing up for big tech. And this is almost like Emmanuel Macron's last throw of the dice. Sorry, I'm just spitballing here. This is just tumbling out of my head. These are just my thoughts, and they're probably not very cogent. But you've got Emmanuel Macron as a president his tenure runs out in 2027, and he probably wants to leave a really positive legacy. He's a real pro EU guy. He wants, like, France is a major player in the EU, so the future of France is kind of linked, as he sees it, with the future of the EU, and he wants to see France and the EU stand up to big tech and the United States. So who are the big people that are going to support Greenland at the moment? France are right in there. And you're starting to see maybe a little bit of union between France and Germany. And they've had a fractious relationship over the last sort of decade or so. Well, they could be coming together because they know nothing causes a rally around a flag like a foreign invasion type thing. So for the EU, the big members of the EU, and you could include like Italy now, like Giorgia Meloni is not a fact. Like, it's really interesting. Trump's moves on Greenland have got the right in France to be critical of Trump. So Jordan Bardella and even Marine Le Pen, sorry, have been critical of Trump. So you've got this, the TLDR News did a really interesting video on this, saying apart from maybe a little bit in like Hungary and places, the right in Europe haven't actually got fully on board with what Trump is doing right now in some of these more crazy escapades. And I think Europe is recognizing that actually Trump is not their fan, even if you are on the far right, and certainly if you're on the far left, and even if you're center or center right. You know, Trump is at the moment driving an assault on Europe on behalf of big tech and also on behalf of himself, because he doesn't like alliances and sees Europe and the EU as a threat, as an adversary. Okay, so this is kind of my working thesis at the moment. But as far as I'm concerned, everything that I'm seeing is supporting this. So if you take my thesis as kind of like that's one understanding of what's going on, does this evidence, just use some abductive reasoning, what's the inference to the best explanation here? Like, does the evidence that we see support my thesis or not my thesis? So Jean-Noël Barrot, the foreign minister for France, again, France standing up for the EU, standing up against the United States, standing up against big tech. France here, Barrot says, European NATO allies are fully capable of defending their territory against any threat, wherever it may come from. So he's saying European NATO is fine with fighting against any threats, even if it's the United States. So you're starting to see all this kind of stuff, right? And this is real, as in someone's made this meme. This is a real opinion. This is a real sentiment that is coming out. There's a sentiment in Europe that they are being pitted against the United States at the moment. And we are seeing that rhetoric come from leaders themselves. So Macron has said that France would take part in Denmark's exercises in Greenland. According to media reports, Germany may also begin deploying troops in Greenland in the coming days to strengthen the island's defense amid Trump's claims, according to De Bild. Emmanuel Macron himself says, at the request of Denmark, I have decided that France will participate in the joint exercises organized by Denmark in Greenland, Operation Arctic Endurance. So nominally, this is against Russia and China, but really this is a statement against the United States. The first French military elements are already on their way. Others will follow. Then we hear, this is coming from Ole Jolsen, who is one of the premiers he's not the prime minister. He is, what is he? What's his... He's one of the premiers. He doesn't say there, but anyway, Emmanuel Macron has announced that the first French soldiers in Greenland will be supported by, quote, by land, air, and maritime assets. So the French are providing, land, air force, and naval assets to supporting Greenland here. This is reported by Le Monde. In a statement, the French president says that Europe is being, quote, shaken in some of its certainties. And of course, what he's referring to is the certainty that the US is a reliable ally, or just an ally. The continent now has, quote, competitors we did not expect to see. This is really strong language from France. Quote, we are living in a world in which destabilizing forces have awakened, Emmanuel Macron said. Around 15 French soldiers are already present in Nuuk, and Emmanuel Macron now announces that this contingent will be reinforced in the coming days. So there's not a lot, but there's not a lot in France, in Greenland, with the aforementioned capabilities. Then we get Scott Bayer interviewing So this is Fox News, and this is
So I'm just doing the math here. 56,000.
This is exactly the sort of place you're going to want to see the Danish foreign minister interviewed. I often say this, you know, this is why Zelensky needs to go on Fox News, because those are the people he needs to convince. Let's listen to him speak to the Danish foreign minister.
So I'm just doing the math here. 56,000, they get 500,000.
I'll read it to you. So they get 500,000. So the idea here is that the US, and there's some claims that the US has proposed huge amounts of money to go to the Greenlanders. So he's going to economically bribe them to come across to the American way of thinking. They get $500,000 a person. I mean, you don't think they are going to vote to break away. The foreign minister Rasmussen says, no, not at all. I don't think there is any way the US will pay for the Scandinavian welfare system in Greenland. So even at 500K, I talked about 100K not being enough, because you'd lose that just in a number of years in terms of having to pay into the healthcare system, the private healthcare system that the United States advocates. And so, you know, so Rasmussen says even 500,000 is not enough. I mean, that remains to be seen. But here we have
depicted that these two dog sleds choosing between
it's such a shame that the audio there is terrible. I don't know if you're feeling that audio as well. I don't know what's going on. I hope that's not the same with all the videos I'm going to try and play.
Between either Russia, China, or the US.
See, this would be let's see if this is the same on another browser, and I might have to just play it on another browser then. Bear with me a second. Sorry about this. Yeah. Okay, so that is really poor audio. Foreign Minister Rasmussen, we need to have a fact-based dialogue. We have not seen a Chinese warship in Greenland for a decade or so. So talking on Fox News, that there is this, need to have a fact-based dialogue. The fact that he's very clearly there saying that, well, Donald Trump and his lackeys around him are not using facts. They're literally lying to you about the prevalence of Russian and Chinese vessels. And again, on Fox News, that's exactly the place you want to see that. I did have a link about, there was an article saying that how much, or there was a source saying how much that the US was bribing the Greenlanders with in one of the claims, but I seem to have lost that. So somebody in the live chat, Mr. Shadur saying all of this is just a resource grab from Trump and the US. They are preparing for Greenland snow to recede more and more and being able to extract more natural resources. I generally agree with that. Was the audio fine for you? Okay, it wasn't for me. It's going all horrible. I will try and play this for you then. Let me know the audio is horrible.
Kind of depicted that these two dog sleds choosing between either Russia, China, or the USA. There is a concern about Russia and China in that area, right?
Yeah, we share that concern. I mean, but we also need to have a facts-based dialogue, and due to at least Danish intelligence, and I don't think your intelligence have a different view on that. We haven't seen a Chinese warship in Greenland for a decade or so. There's absolutely no Chinese investments in Greenland. When I served as Prime Minister, I served Prime Minister twice. We avoided any kind of Chinese investments in infrastructure. 10 years ago, the Road and Belt Initiative, what you have seen in Africa, we avoided all that. We now build new international airports in Greenland. They are funded by Danish money. We had an abandoned American military installation years ago. There was a global tender. I personally intervened in this in order to avoid, any Chinese footprint. So there's absolutely no Chinese footprint in Greenland.
But they aspire.
Having said that,
we can say they aspire. Russia and China.
Yeah. And having said that, I fully share. I know your president very well. I have met him on several occasions. I was among the first European leaders to meet him in his first term. And there's always, a bit of truth in what he's saying. And we definitely share the concern that Arctic is not any longer a low tension region. And of course, we have to be aware of that. And that's why we have invested almost 15 billion US dollars last year in capabilities in Greenland.
And that's part of the pitch.
So he is saying, look, we are doing our thing. Like, you know, the US keeps slagging, well, sorry, Trump keeps slagging us off, talking about dog sleds only, and they are important. They are a way you get around somewhere like that. But actually, with as you guys are mentioning in the live chat, with receding, you know, with climate change, you're thinking your Northwest Passage is going to be open. These Arctic areas are going to be with much less ice. You're going to be able to traverse these areas by ship for longer periods of time during the year, so on and so forth. And you might get Russia and China trying to get a bit closer, but the existing framework allows for the US to be active in Greenland and even to access those rare earth minerals. So, you know, it's just this bizarre situation. It really is. Nothing we haven't already talked about, though. But it's funny when Benny Johnson, the guy that took money from Russia through Tenet Media, who is right at the heart of the American administration, really, as an influencer, is saying America needs Greenland. China or Russia will occupy it if we don't. It's time. There was such a good Gavin Newsom. I'm going to find this for you. It is so. Gavin Newsom is going to be vying to become president in the next presidential elections. He's got this press room, this press team that is fighting fire with fire, and they've been doing loads of memes and you know, really being on top of internet law and whatnot, and they have been fighting Trump's fire with their own fire, and they've been on it. Well, I don't know if you know that Benny Johnson, there are these rumors that, and they're more than rumors, there are people who've come out and said, actually, I know because I was one of them, blah, blah, blah. But that actually he's got a sort of marriage of convenience, and that he wasn't, and that he is gay and he's on Grindr and all this kind of stuff. And then Gavin Newsom just came out and destroyed him the other day. This is it. It's absolutely brilliant. So Benny Johnson said, fraud investigation announcement. Next week, our team is traveling to the fraud capital of the world, California, which is where Gavin Newsom is governor. The fraud uncovered in Minnesota was very bad and led to the destruction of Tim Walz's career. But Gavin Newsom's California is far worse. The American taxpayer, blah, 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 blah. So Benny Johnson announces that. And Governor Newsom's press office says, we'll make sure Grindr servers are ready. So this is a very real thing that happens every time the RNC was in wherever it was, and they went to Arizona and they went to somewhere else. And these guys are supposed to be anti-LGBTQ plus all that kind of stuff. They are you know, anti-gay essentially. But wherever they go for these big conferences, Grindr, so Grindr, if you don't know, is like the Tinder for gay people. So it's it's a dating and meeting up app for gay people. And whenever they have these Republican conferences, the Grindr servers crash in the location where the conferences take place. So the theory, or it's not just the reality is that many people who claim they are anti-gay are actually gay themselves, and you get this a lot within the mega churches where they're all like homophobic, and it turns out they're having rent boys and all this kind of stuff. The brilliance here is that Gavin Newsom press office knows that, and they know about these Grindr servers going down. So they have you can test internet outages. You can go on these websites and you can check whether the servers are down or services are down. And this happens with Grindr when Grindr is being used, it's being, you know, flooded with too much use, and that seems to happen when the Republican conferences are going on. Anyway, Benny Johnson, known for being gay but claiming he's not and having a wife and kids, will make sure Grindr servers are ready for when you come to California. Is just a brilliant like one-liner to put Benny Johnson down there. And that's a kind of fighting fire with fire, which is why Gavin Newsom is becoming, you know, a bit of a favorite for challenging Trump to be president or whoever it will be, because he is ready to pull up his sleeves and get stuck in that kind of internet way. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you. But, you know, here we've got Benny Johnson saying America needs Greenland. China or Russia will occupy it if we don't. It's time. You've got these people who are cheerleading for invading NATO allies. This is absolutely disgusting. Like Benny Johnson, if he had said that during like the Bush presidency or similar, even in Trump 1.0, he would have been, you know, or not during the Bush presidency, during the Obama presidency even, or the Biden presidency, you know, if Biden had ever said something as ridiculous as, I think it's great to invade Greenland, the Republicans would have gone absolutely insane. So anyway, Jay and Kiev says, a guy that was taking $400,000 a month to push propaganda for the Russian government is now promoting America's invasion of Greenland. As I keep saying, you know, where is it? Sorry, it's as I keep saying, the Russians and the Chinese, they're popping champagne corks because everything that's going on with regard to Greenland and Venezuela to a degree, but more Greenland, particularly Greenland, actually not so much Venezuela, is to the plays into the Russian agenda. Disuniting Europe, attacking NATO, undoing NATO. This is Putin's absolute dream. It really is. It's ridiculous. And then there's this, just as if Greenland wasn't enough, on the back of Canada and Mexico, Colombia, Cuba, Venezuela, we now have Trump's nominee for our US ambassador to Iceland. So the next country along from Greenland, Billy Long, joked that Iceland would become the 52nd US state and he'd be its governor. So the idea is a 51st state would be, I guess, Greenland, and that I'm the nominee for Iceland's ambassador. I reckon it'll be the 52nd state of America. If you get through to be governor, to be ambassador, to Iceland, I hope Iceland put you in your place. I hope you get roundly rejected as, I don't know. It's just, what timeline are we living in where this is the norm? It's absolutely incredible. Not in a good way. So then we've got this really revealing Politico article that comes out and speaks to this idea that people like Vance, who, remember, Peter Thiel, this oligarch who we're going to return to in a second, who I think wants Greenland to be part of the United States. He's a tech authoritarian. Peter Thiel paid for JD Vance to become the senator for Ohio. And then when he was senator, it was Peter Thiel that wanted him to become the vice president. And then Donald Trump Jr., I think he was, advocated for Vance to be vice president when Donald Trump didn't give a damn about JD Vance, but eventually picked JD Vance. He is the tech oligarch's pick for VP. So who's he going to be advocating for? The tech oligarchy. So when JD Vance comes to Europe to the Munich Security Conference and slags off the Europeans for not having freedom of speech, who's he representing? The big tech, the American big tech industry. So when he goes to Greenland and when he talks to the Danish foreign minister and the Greenlandic foreign minister, what's he going to be advocating on behalf of? American imperialism with regard to the big tech industry. Politico has this article that is talking to, I think they talked to 10 different European diplomats who agree that Vance hates us. European diplomats warn that America is no longer an ally. Vance hates us, and Trump won't stop at anything to get control over Greenland, perhaps via military means. They warn that it's a very dire situation and Europe has to prepare. So this idea that we shouldn't be worrying about the US, worry about what he does, not what he says. No, we're beyond that now. This is what he wants to do. He really wants this. So in this Politico article, with these 10 European officials, among the 10 ministers, it says, the officials who spoke anonymously to Politico for this article, none regarded Vance as an ally, either in the Greenland talks or for the transatlantic relationship in general. Quote, Vance hates us, said one European diplomat, granted anonymity to give a candid view, like others quoted in this article. The announcement that the vice president would be helming the Washington talks. I talked about helming yesterday as a gerund. And now we've got the word helming, and I was like wondering whether that is an actual noun form of to helm. What a weird coincidence. How bizarre. Anyway, the announcement that stuff like that makes me happy. The announcement that the vice president would be helming the Washington talks and on Greenland alarmed the European side. Quote, he's the tough guy, said the same diplomat said. The fact that he's there says a lot, and I think it's negative for the outcome. Now, Rubio, on the other hand, was seen as, quote, solid. And this is kind of our sense of that, you know, you guys, and we've been talking about this for months now, maybe a year, that Marco Rubio is your sensible guy. He's your traditional Republican who has a fair grasp of the realities of international geopolitics. JD Vance is your ideological wingnut who is aligned to the tech oligarchs and is basically acting as their marketing manager. And the Europeans understand this. Vance hates us. Rubio, he's all right. And yet both of those would have been working, and I don't think they like each other, Vance and Rubio, have been working to get, I guess, what each of them think is the right outcome with regard to Greenland. But I do wonder whether Rubio is just now captured, that he's just having to toe the party line, the Trump party line, because, you know, his soul has evaporated from behind his eyes, and he's now just a dead man walking. Now, Don Bacon, who's the Republican representative from Nebraska, he's retiring from his position at the end of his term in November 2026. So he's now coming out and being pretty critical. Like Tom Tillis and others, they only seem to criticize Trump when they know they're on the way out. He says there would be GOP support, and this is huge. Now, I don't know that there would be enough support for this, but he says if Trump invades Greenland, there would be enough support for Trump's actual impeachment. I should bloody hope so. I really do. But anyway, that's pretty impressive. Well, it's not impressive. That's how it should be. But, you know, it's good that he's come out to say that. Now, we're going to move from Greenland to Venezuela, but we're going to return to Greenland in a very short while, just to give you a sense of what's going on in other places. Trump enthusiastically endorsing keeping the Maduro regime in power in Venezuela. So he said on Truth Social, this morning, I had a very good call with the interim president of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez. Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president under Maduro, is vehemently anti-American. He kidnapped Maduro because he was so awful and he was responsible for X, Y, and Z. Rodriguez was just as responsible in many, well, probably not just as, but she's no different really. And there didn't seem to be any kind of desire to get a huge regime change. This seems to just be a precursor to nicking their oil and nothing more. So they put this woman in charge, expecting, at least nominally, for there to be a difference of governance. And yet apparently you've got armed groups going around looking for American people to lynch because there's a lot of anti-American sentiment from at least the pro-government people in Venezuela. Anyway, Trump here then talking about how wonderful Rodriguez is. We are making tremendous progress as we help Venezuela stabilize and recover. Many topics were discussed, including oil, minerals, trade, and of course, national security. This partnership between the United States of America and Venezuela will be a spectacular one for all. Venezuela will soon be great and prosperous again, perhaps more so than ever before. I don't know how it can be prosperous if the United States is stealing its biggest source of income. Speaking of which, Trump sold $500 million of stolen Venezuelan oil and is holding most of the money in an account in Qatar, the country that bribed Trump with a private jet. And this barely is a blip on the news because all of the other corruption and crimes. Revenue, quote, revenue from the oil sales is currently being held in bank accounts controlled by the US government, as indicated in Friday's order, according to the administration official. The main account, according to a second senior administration official, is located in Qatar. Oh, how convenient. And that's coming from Semaphore there. So, my goodness. Right, more on that then. Shanaka Anselm Pereira says the Venezuela story everyone missed. The US just sold $500 million of Venezuelan oil. So they've stolen this oil and they sold it and they're taking the money and they're putting it in accounts such as in Qatar. This is just robbery. This is gunship diplomacy. This is piracy. But they deposited the money in Qatar, not the US, not Venezuela, in Qatar. Here is why that satisfies detailed changes. This is why that detail changes everything you think you know about what's just happened. Venezuela owes $170 billion to international creditors, bondholders, oil companies, China. Everyone is owed money. Any account in the US or Venezuela would be immediately seized through litigation. So if they put it in US accounts, then it would be, the US would be sued by people who would want that money to be theirs, because creditors are owed money before, you know, they would be like, hang on, you're stealing $500 million of Venezuelan oil and therefore $500 million from Venezuela. But they owe us $500 million. So we actually legally would be entitled to that money before you. You're not even legally entitled to it. You've stolen it. So the US is putting it in Qatar. That's why they're not putting it in the treasury, as according to, because I was wondering about this. Venezuela owes 170 billion to international creditors, bondholders, blah, blah, blah. It would be susceptible to litigation if it went to US bank accounts. So the Trump administration parked the money in Qatar, a quote neutral venue where funds flow freely with US approval and without risk of seizure. This is not liberation. This is not regime change. This is not intervention. This is the first operational deployment of a new architecture for sovereign resource capture. The sequence: January 3rd, capture the president. January the 6th, announce the US will run the oil sector indefinitely. January the 9th, sign executive order shielding revenues from all creditors. January the 14th, complete the first $500 million sale. 12 days from military operation to revenue capture. Iraq took 6 years to sign its first major oil contracts after 2003. Foreign companies operated under Iraqi law. Revenues went to Iraqi accounts. Venezuela 2026, the US government directly markets the oil, completes the sales and deposits proceeds in accounts it controls in third countries. This has never happened before. Never. Yeah. Not in Iraq, not in Libya, not in Kuwait. Not anywhere since 1945. The executive order is the key document. It declares that Venezuelan oil revenues are exempt from all creditor claims, all legal judgments, all international arbitration. Of course, that is just by assertion, right? With one signature, $170 billion in legal obligations became unenforceable. The international legal architecture built over 80 years was bypassed through a domestic executive order and an account in Doha. ExxonMobil's CEO called Venezuela uninvestable at the White House meeting last week. He is correct. And it does not matter. When the US government controls the revenue stream, shields it from courts, and promises to, quote, make it real easy, the old investment calculus is obsolete. The template is now operational. Designate governments as narco-terrorists, deploy military to capture the leadership, install the cooperative interim authority, issue executive order voiding all prior obligations, sell resources through US-controlled channels, deposit proceeds in jurisdictions beyond legal reach. Any nation with vast natural resources, a government whose legitimacy can be contested, and insufficient military deterrence, just watch this template execute in real time. Venezuela has 303 plus billion barrels of proven reserves, the largest on earth. The US now controls the revenue stream. This is not a story about Trump or Maduro or intervention ethics. This is the birth of new imperial architecture that renders the post-Westphalian legal order irrelevant through financial engineering and offshore banking. The 21st century will not be shaped by international law. It will be shaped by whoever controls the accounts. Now, make of that what you will. That's just one person's opinion. But that seems incredibly plausible to me. And it's just incredible, absolutely incredible that this is happening. Now we're going to return back to Greenland to just have a look at a Casey Michel New Republic article. Edward Hunter Christie, I've interviewed him. Is well worth a listen. A must read about the tech oligarchs that support an imperialist approach to Greenland, motivated by its resources and large land mass for all manner of exploitation and experimentation, and not subject to European style laws and regulations. And that's key. It's not in the EU. It's a territory of Denmark, but it's not in the EU. That is an important point. Now, this article is well worth a read. It's a lot longer and has a lot more information than I am going to share with you, because obviously we've only got so much time. The oligarchs pushing for conquest in Greenland. Trump's fixation on filching the island territory from Denmark may seem like the demented ravings of a mad king, but to a cohort of plutocrat weirdos, it makes perfect sense. I'm going to join it down here. So, an island itself, nearly the size of Venezuela, Greenland is a veritable treasure chest of critical minerals and high-value resources: zinc, copper, gold, oil, even things like uranium and platinum. Greenland is a periodic table of elements brought to life because most of the island is a combination of glacier and sere tundra. I don't know what sere tundra is, but tundra is obviously the permanently frozen ground, basically. Most of those elements are untapped, but that doesn't mean they've been unmapped or that excavation plans haven't been plotted. And a few cohorts have done more mapping, plotting, and planning than the coterie of American oligarchs who have surged to Trump's side in recent years and who stand to gain hand over fist if Trump wrests Greenland from Denmark's control. And this is hardly speculation, as The Guardian reported in April 2025, quote, "Some of Donald Trump's biggest campaign donors and investors are positioned to potentially profit from any American takeover of Greenland." That was April 2025. Ranging from tech moguls to fossil fuel company heads, all of these figures and forces have invested in mining and extraction companies across the island, and all stand to profit if only they can cut out any pesky Danish or Greenlandic authorities from regulating or restraining their operations. A closed loop of, quote, investors, billionaires, and Trump have emerged to circle Greenland, swirling it like a committee of vultures, eyeing which parts of Greenland to pluck clean. As the New York Times added last year, Trump is, quote, flanked by wealthy investors who have eyed Greenland as a potentially lucrative venue for mining minerals and metals and minerals. The figures behind the curtain are by no means obscure. Cobalt Metals, a mining outfit helping lead Greenland's modern gold rush, has seen investments from figures like Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and hedge funds like Andreessen Horowitz. That would be Mark Andreessen, I'm sure. Another company eyeing Greenland is Critical Metals Corp, which is backed by the same hedge fund that Howard Lutnick, who is Trump's commerce secretary, spent years running. Indeed, so all of these is so incestuous. Indeed, the investors behind Critical Metals Corp have significant overlap with those investors behind Trump Media, creating what Robert Weissman, who helps the pro-transparency group Public Citizen, called, quote, a circle of grift. Many of these same figures also gave hundreds of millions of dollars to Trump's 2024 campaign, helping relaunch him to the presidency and helping them profit from Trump's new imperialism. So when I was talking about big tech having a real say in why Trump is doing what he's doing with regard to Greenland, there is a lot, there's an awful lot in this. Now, it goes then to look at the tangle of deep-pocketed corporate heads backing American politicians, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to join it a little bit later. Yet even that story of American oligarchs pushing an imperial president to new land sieges and new wealth is only part of the picture. So the kind of minerals and rare earth metals and stuff, to new land sieges and new wealth, it's only part of the picture. Greenland isn't only a treasure trove for some of these oligarchic forces to mine or to extract. It's also a place for experimentation, not only in how to expand American empire, but in how to create a world in which all of these oligarchic figures, utopian or dystopian for the rest of us, fantasies can come true. And this goes back to the kind of freedom cities I talked about yesterday. The man long at the center of these murkier fantasies is a slender, sandy-haired American named Dryden Brown. He is the head of an organization called Praxis, which has become one of the centers of the so-called network state movement. The definition of network states is itself a bit jumbled. A network state, says backer Balaji Srinivasan, is a, quote, highly aligned online community with a capacity for collective action that crowdfunds territory around the world and eventually gains diplomatic recognition from pre-existing states. If you scrape past the techno-babble, the idea for a network state is relatively simple. It is a new nation, both online and on land, that can provide an escape hatch for forces who want to do away with the regulatory oversight or financial checks, who envision a world in which they can expand both their wealth and their influence as wide as they want, and who believe that nation states, including places like the US, are passé, outmoded ways of organizing societies, and the next iteration of humanity must belong to these self-appointed visionaries, authoring a revolutionary future wherever they can. So this goes back to the idea of techno-fascism or techno-authoritarianism, like people like Peter Thiel advocate. and it goes back to that sci-fi idea where you don't have nation states anymore. You have corporations, you have tech conglomerations or tech entities controlling parts of the world. That is literally what these guys want. Now, gathering supporters largely from the world of crypto enthusiasts, Praxis emerged in recent years as a leader of this movement. Its manifesto, published in 2024, posited that the world is, quote, at an inflection point where power is increasingly determined by the ability to capture mind share of globally dispersed communities. Praxis, with Brown at the helm, would create a world in which the trappings of society, infrastructure, contracts, and more are placed and tracked on the blockchain. This would all create a sovereign network or digital nation that would be, as Le Monde reported, a, quote, tax-free enclave governed by free market principles and managed by a king CEO leading citizen shareholders. Still, for a sovereign network to emerge in the real world, it would need territory in which to operate. While other similar efforts in Honduras, Nigeria, and elsewhere have fallen apart, Brown told me last year that one place in particular continued to catch his eye: Greenland. Quote, "We think Greenland is a very interesting place," Brown said. "We view it as one of the last frontiers of Earth." If Brown operated on his own, he'd be hardly worth writing about, but Praxis has received funding from significant investors from across the US, including many of the same oligarchs in Trump's immediate orbit, and this is where all the dots start joining. There's Peter Thiel, the venture capitalist who has long backed Trump and who has long called for oligarchic fellow travelers to escape democratic oversight. This is techno-fascism or techno-authoritarianism. Others, such as Mark Andreessen of the aforementioned Andreessen Horowitz, have likewise backed funds that support Praxis, with fellow investors like John Lonsdale also supporting the group. Even the Winklevoss twins, best known for their early roles in Facebook, have steered investment to Praxis. Perhaps the most conspicuous oligarch linked to Praxis is none other than Sam Altman. While Altman has never commented publicly about Praxis, his Apollo Ventures firm, and he's the AI guy behind OpenAI, firm has funded Praxis directly. Quote, "Altman has strange politics," Jill Duran, who has tracked the network state movement perhaps more than anyone else, wrote in 2024. Quote, "His investment in Praxis makes it clear that despite platitudes about creating a better future, he's betting on some kind of dramatic collapse." So last year, and of course, you know, the end of NATO would bring that about, right? Last year, during Trump's early rounds of demands that the US be given control of Greenland, Reuters reported that a range of, quote, Silicon Valley tech investors had begun promoting the frozen island as a site for the so-called Freedom City, a libertarian utopia with minimal corporate regulation. Aligning with Praxis's vision for a network state in Greenland, Reuters reported that these oligarchic investors envisioned transforming Greenland into a supposed startup paradise for Silicon Valley obsessions, building the island into a hub, quote, hub for artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, space launches, micronuclear reactors, and high-speed rail. Some of the names mentioned there were those already connected with Praxis. Both Thiel and Andreessen were reportedly propelling the idea, as well as Lonsdale, who called outright for, quote, expanding our country to Greenland. And there you go. Thiel has denied interest or involvement, while Andreessen declined to comment. But there was one additional name mentioned, Ken Howery, himself a former venture capitalist who had previously co-founded PayPal along with Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. Yet Howery wasn't simply another hyper-capitalist floating out of Silicon Valley. He was appointed by Trump himself as America's newest ambassador to, drumroll please, Denmark. And was specifically, quote, expected to lead Greenland acquisition negotiations, those familiar with the appointment said. Do not discount this stuff, guys. This is going on. I almost sound like some conspiracy theory nut job, but the money is there from these most powerful people in human history, right? These are super powerful people as individuals, these tech oligarchs. And if you're going to throw Elon Musk in there, the most powerful man on earth. Now, I don't know how much Musk has to do with this stuff, but he is deeply involved with all these people. Nearly a year later, those negotiations are reaching their final stages, with Trump telegraphing that he will make whatever move necessary, even military if needed, to steal Greenland. It's a plan that has a potential to fracture NATO and even spark a new age of nuclear arms races and outright imperialism. It is also, as we're now learning, a plan that extends far beyond Trump, and that includes a cast of oligarchs looking to steer American empire once more. Or as Praxis's social media feed posted in response to Houry's appointment. So when Houry was appointed to Greenland ambassador, Praxis said, quote, according to plan. Honestly, this is like, I hope this makes sense to you, but there's a lot more than just Trump being a wingnut here going on. This is big tech against the rest of the world, big tech against Europe, and individual people in the big tech industry, but also like big players like Meta and OpenAI and Palantir. It is, and now you've got XAI getting into bed with the Pentagon, along with Palantir. You've got Elon Musk thrown in there as well. The Pentagon, as a military arm of the United States, as a military hub, decision-making center, is now compromised by Palantir and XAI, by two of these South African oligarchs. It is absolutely incredible. And so Europe is the last bastion of nationhood, I think, standing up to big tech. That isn't just, I mean, China and Russia can stand up to big tech by closing big tech off, and they don't seem to do anything about it. They've like given up on authoritarians. They're like Elon Musk. He loves China and Russia because he can still plunder them or like get his natural resources out of them. And China, he can still build his Teslas there. He's been given unique access to the Chinese economy compared to any other foreign corporate entity or foreign industrial entity. So he leaves them alone, and they go, these big tech oligarchs, for Europe. They want control over Europe. This is one way they're going about it. And that brings me very nicely to the second article that finishes joining all the dots here. And this ends up being why I decided to do this live stream on the topic that you're hearing rather than ICE, because there was too much to include talking about ICE today. So here we have an article in the Brussels Times. So Dave Keating here says Meta, Microsoft and Google are all, so don't think Google and Microsoft, are all benign in this as well, are all coordinating with the European far right in order to dismantle EU digital laws designed to protect citizens, according to a new report. A recent American government strategy outlined regime change plans to support the far right. So you've got the national security strategy that not only wants to disunite Europe, it seems, and support what they called the new patriotic parties in Europe. And they were like really excited to see them prevail in Europe. But you've got big tech doing that as well. And we already understand that the national security strategy, and in fact, America's foreign policy, appears to be just an arm for the tech industry, right? So in the Brussels Times, you have US tech giants allying with European far right to strip back EU rules. Amid rising EU-US tensions, a new report has accused big tech of courting far right MEPs to weaken the EU's regulatory power on AI and data. This is a huge article as well, and I'm only going to dip into probably half of this. But honestly, please go and read this. Should be linked in the description below if I'm correct. So, big tech companies such as Google, Microsoft, and Meta increased their meetings with far-right groups in the European Parliament ahead of the Commission's push last year, revealed in a new analysis by non-profit organizations Corporate Europe Observatory and Lobby Control. Quote, this is largely because the far right has expressed support for the Commission's deregulation plans, Bram Vranken, CEO's researcher and campaigner, told the Brussels Times. So the far right often says it's libertarian, right? Reform, well, UKIP used to do this, called itself a libertarian party, but then actually it wanted to stop people moving, and that's still a fundamental human right. If you truly are libertarians, why the actual Libertarian Party in the United States advocates for free movement of people and immigration. So if you're actually a libertarian, immigration is fine. because you should not put a stop on the liberty of people to move from A to B. So the movement of the human being is a fundamental cornerstone of libertarian ideology. So if you claim you're a libertarian, I wrote an article on this saying that people who claim they're libertarians but anti-immigration are faux libertarians. I tried to use this term faux libertarianism, which is you're a false libertarian. You aren't really a libertarian if you're saying, well, we should have no regulation in the corporate world. We should allow corporate entities, the free market, to dictate essentially morality. But you can't move from A to B. Oh, but we should have all these freedoms. Oh, by the way, you can't have abortions. We can't allow, but you're not allowed to be gay, and you're not allowed to marry, but I'm libertarian. So it turns out that libertarians, generally speaking, or like the false libertarians, are very interested in corporate freedoms, but not individual social and cultural freedoms. And so there's a real tension there. Anyway, these faux libertarians often talk about, well, we don't want to regulate the tech industry because, you know, free speech and freedom. We don't want regulation. We don't like regulation, right? And so the far right seem to be much more okay with tech getting their way. And we just saw this, I showed you yesterday in Parliament in the UK, in Prime Minister's questions, when Keir Starmer had to go at Nigel Farage saying, hey, we are standing up to Elon Musk here because we are trying to protect children and women from the sexualization going on with Grok and blah, blah, blah. And you, in Reform, you don't give a damn about this because you want these guys to have freedom to do whatever they want with their algorithms and with our societies. And, you know, Nigel Farage and Richard Tice were laughing on the other side of the aisle. But it's absolutely true. And big tech knows this. That's why they caught these people, because it's their way in. So if the far right in the EU get their way, then the EU disintegrates and they're dealing with individual countries, and individual countries can't stand up to big tech. So big tech needs the EU to fall apart, because the EU is the only democratic entity that is able to stand up to the tech industry. And that is that. And that's why you get an article like this. And that's why you want these guys to help themselves to Greenland, which isn't part of the EU. And if Greenland can be wrested away from I guess the tendrils of power, as they see it, from the EU through Denmark onto Greenland, if they can cut those tendrils and have Greenland for themselves through having it part of the American empire, then they can have their way. They can have their own tech nation state, if you like, their freedom city, as they call it. But in order to accelerate that, and also to take advantage of this massive population of Europe, they need the undoing of the EU. So, quote, this is largely because the far right has expressed support for the Commission's deregulation plans, Bram Vranken, CEO's research and campaigner, told the Brussels Times. Vranken pointed to comments made by the Patriots for Europe group, which called on the Commission. So this is one of the coalitions in the European Parliament full of right-wingers, more extreme right-wingers, called on the Commission to go further than a digital omnibus, while the ECR group said the digital omnibus is, quote, is good news, but not enough. So the digital omnibus is, I think, the European Commission's deregulatory push in the digital omnibus. So the EU appears to be wanting to do several things. On the one hand, it wants to deregulate to try and stimulate economic growth through AI and whatnot. And on the other hand, it wants to regulate for cultural reasons and it also wants to tax and to protect consumers. So there is a little bit of, you know, it delayed the AI Act and weakened GDPR protection. So GDPR, for those not in the EU or not in the UK, because we've taken on GDPR protections, is data protection. So, you know, there has to be certain things that, you know, when you your private data can't be utilized in certain ways by other entities and whatnot. So there's this. So now the EU is thinking about this digital omnibus that would actually weaken some of these other regulations. but it's revealed to closely align with big tech's lobbying demands while seriously damaging EU citizens' digital rights. So this digital omnibus is argued to be a threat to consumers in the EU. So Vranken pointed to comments made by Patriots for Europe group, which called on the Commission to go further than the digital omnibus. So the far right wants to go even further in the deregulation of big tech, while the ECR group said the digital omnibus is good news but not enough. US tech giants are now spreading their messages with a record-breaking lobbying budget, so they're spending huge amounts of money to lobby people in the EU, a huge lobbying network, and support from the Trump administration, according to the report. So not only that, they're also getting support from the Trump administration through their attempts to do trade deals with the EU, with the UK, to put tech regulation on the block there for carving up over these trade deals. The digital industry's annual lobby spending has grown from 113 million euros in 2023 to 151 million euros today, an increase of 33.6% in just 2 years. They are spending that on lobbying the EU. United States President Trump, too, has threatened to punish the EU with tariffs for regulating US tech companies. This is the fight. This is the fight. Europe against the EU is Europe against, or the EU against the United States is the EU against tech. And the United States, from a diplomatic, governmental point of view, is just advocating for and working on behalf of the tech industry. So anyway, they've got their far right. I mean, there's loads of info in this article. There's a quote later on. Big tech companies, and especially Meta, seem to be anticipating this possibility and have spent the past months building relationships with far right MEPs. During the parliamentary mandate, Meta has already met 38 times with MEPs from the ECR and Patriots for Europe. These are two far-right coalitions, and the Europe of Sovereign Nations group. That's 3 of them then, according to Vranken. In the week of 8th of December alone, representatives of the Silicon Valley company met with 4 far-right lawmakers, with a majority of meetings referencing the digital omnibus. For comparison, Meta only met once with a far-right MEP in the last mandate. So previously, they weren't very interested in meeting with far-right people, but now they're doing it loads. The Commission's deregulation agenda is not just opening the door to big tech, it's inviting the far-right in, Vranken stresses. Quote later here, the big tech firms have successfully tapped into the Trump administration's hostility towards the EU to attack its digital rulebook. So you've probably got agendas aligning here. The anti-EU situation from an economic, anti-alliance point of view, from ideologues in the Trump administration, aligns with the big tech anti-EU approach because they don't want regulation. Yet Vranken believes it is deeply ironic that the Commission is promoting its deregulation agenda as a way to make the EU competitive. Quote, in reality, it's actively empowering US big tech companies that dominate the field. So what he goes on to say is that by trying to deregulate the EU for big tech, to stimulate economic growth and competition, it's actually just allowing these massive companies to get more and more power, which ends up being an active functional monopoly. And it doesn't work. Deregulation here, ironically, kind of almost counterintuitively, works to be anti-competitive, because these big tech companies are so freaking huge, they're functional monopolies in their own little domains. So the Commission's digital package was framed as boosting competitiveness as per Mario Draghi's agenda. So he's former Italian premier who was big in the EU. But this research shows that it largely dismantles core data protection, e-privacy and AI Act safeguards in ways that mainly benefit these big US firms. Campaigners are angry that enforcement of the Digital Service Act, so this is the one that they want to do away with the big tech companies, and the Digital Markets Act have also been delayed despite the evidence of non-compliance by these tech firms. And now the Commission is rolling back key digital rights in line with tech lobbying positions. So the Commission is, it seems, bending the knee in the EU to the big tech firms. Quote, the European Commission is fixed on a misguided idea that deregulation will unleash AI innovation and has made that dogma one of its cornerstone policies, Vranken explains. Deregulation is a highly monopolized market. in a highly monopolized market, however, only risks further entrenching dominant players. So it's only going to benefit the big. Anyway, like as you can see, this is a massive article. I'm not going to go into any more of it, but I'm just trying to join the dots here that what's going on in the EU with lobbying. That lobbying is coming from the United States, essentially the big tech firms. What's going on in Greenland, what's going on with the US is, or the Trump administration's adversarial relationship with the EU is all underwritten by the big tech industry, by the tech industry. Honestly, this is where it's at. And I'll just read this next post, and then we'll move on to a slightly different topic. So this is Emmanuel Pernot-Leplay, who is geopolitics, AI, and tech, blah, 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 expert. Europe wants tech sovereignty, and big tech is taking it seriously. So then you've got this other situation that feeds into the anti-American agenda of the EU at the moment, in terms of we need to move away from dependence on American tech from a national security point of view and an economic security point of view. So you've had this idea that, hey, 90 billion euros is going to go to Ukraine, 60 billion is going to be spent on weapons. We want that European money to be spent on European weapons. That's France's position. And you've got this idea that everyone in Europe is too dependent on the US, and that goes to the tech industry as well. So the idea that Europe could stand up on its own 2 feet, completely independent from the United States, is a 10-year plan that would cost something like $1 trillion or trillion euros. I taught you through this the other day or the other week when I did a video on how can Ukraine or Europe stand up and be militarily independent from the US. Well, it can't be, because it needs way more satellites. So it's really interesting that Eutelsat and OneWeb have just put an order in for 340 satellites, I think, the other day. So they understand that they need to get away from reliance on Starlink and SpaceX and US satellite provision. Fascinating. You'll love this quote for today. This is really important. I'm going to talk about it tomorrow and in my military aid video next. Emmanuel Macron came out and said today that previously, Ukraine was entirely dependent on the United States for its satellite and intelligence. Macron came out today and said, now France on its own provides 2/3 of Ukrainian, I believe, satellite intelligence. 2/3 of it is now coming from France. So this idea that the French and the Germans and the Europeans, they want to become tech independent or security independent, military industrial complex independent from the United States, would require loads of satellites. It would require loads of infrastructure, but then you've got cloud networks, so cloud provision. So all our data is being cloud controlled, if you like, or housed by the Americans. The Americans are overwhelmingly in control of where all our data is stored. So if you want independence, European independence from the United States for your own security and economy, then you're in trouble, because at the moment, the Americans have like a kind of monopoly on that. So anyway, we're going to go back to this statement here. So tech sovereignty will be a key issue in 2026. Watch the Cybersecurity Act update. So there's obviously going to be some EU updating to bills and whatnot. And cloud sovereignty is central. It's all about independence. I've already shared Airbus's search for an EU sovereign cloud. So Airbus is this international conglomerate, including the British, that is your answer to Boeing. And they want, apparently, their cloud services to be independent from the United States. So they're looking for an EU sovereign cloud. But this, so the reference here is to this news piece, the AWS, which is the Amazon cloud services, huge. Amazon make buckets of money from the cloud services. I think same with Microsoft with their Azure, is it? And then Google and then whoever else, right? AWS, so Amazon Cloud Services, flips a switch on a Euro cloud as customers fret about digital sovereignty. EU-only operations, German subsidiaries, and a pinky promise your data won't end up in Uncle Sam's hands. So what it looks like is American cloud providers are quite savvy, and they understand that the Europeans want tech sovereignty, and they understand that in principle, someone like Donald Trump, if he got more and more control, could just turn off the cloud services so that Europe is absolutely screwed. So what they're trying to do is divest some of their cloud, or not divest, they're trying to move or allow for this situation where some of their cloud storage is actually EU based, even though Amazon as an umbrella still owns a lot of it. It's kind of like we're going to have a European subsidiary. So here, Pernod Laplay says, I've already shared Airbus's search for that, blah, blah, blah. Still, he said, but this Amazon's new offer is arguably not 100% sovereign. So it's still like owned by Amazon. Still, their point is that everything is located in Europe and operated by Europeans, which would make it more resilient to geopolitical disruptions. So at least these cloud services will be, like, I presume the servers and whatnot will be based in Europe, and it would be operated within Europe. S3NS, which is Google and Thales. So Thales is a French-based military concern, has just received the highest SecNum cloud certification from the French cyber authority ANSSI that has raised concerns over the fact that S3NS may be protected against regulatory intrusion, the US Cloud Act, but not against technological dependencies, although mitigation measures are in place, such as access to source code. No solution is perfect, but every bit of sovereignty gained is a win. This is going in the right direction. So watch this space again. So you've got a fight against the big American tech giants, and then you've got a need for Europe to be independent from them. But at the moment, that would take a decade and trillions of euros of investment, and you just can't. And a 10-year delay. So you wouldn't be able to have independence until 10 years. So what are the stepping stones towards that? Well, there's maybe a halfway house here of having American big tech subsidiarize to have cloud provision in Europe. Anyway, like that kind of finishes that whole section on big tech and how it underwrites so much of what is going on with international politics. I hope this all makes sense, and I hope you're still with me. I haven't really been paying attention to the live chat, and I do get into my own head and in my own world. I just want to do some thanks before we finish off with the last stuff I've got to talk about. Niels Clement says, gives 10 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thank you, Niels. I really appreciate you. And Johnny Nebregard, as ever, supporting on the super chats. Thank you, mate. So John here says, please explain to Trump the difference between we are going to nuke Greenland and we're going to nuke Greenland and we're going to nuke Greenland. So nuke is the capital. Very good. I like that. I like a good pun. Puntastic. Johnny Nebregard. So does anyone else think that Trump backed off Iran because fixing that is bad for Vlad? We're going to come to that. I've got some stuff on that. So I hopefully gonna come to that. Hi, Chris R. Hi from the Polish-Ukrainian border. So I am. There's a couple of things that have happened recently. Someone's just delivered a car. So Chris, I think this is Chris that's just delivered a car to Ukraine, and I also have a Michael who's delivered a car to Ukraine and met up through Car for Ukraine, inspired by the channel to go and do that. And he's met up with Ivan in Lviv. And I'm going to show his video to you tomorrow morning, if I remember. I must remember. So hi, Chris. Hope you are well. India, Brazil, pretty much all of Mercosur. So this is a group of countries that's just done a deal with EU, jumps into the EU ship now. I said long ago, if Trump goes nuts any longer, China may team up with the EU as well. Some people laugh, but let's see. So this is Martin Matt. So what you've noticed is that the EU has been cozying up to China, and China has been getting on okay with the EU, comparatively speaking, because actually the US has pushed these two together. And that is against the US's surely overarching geopolitical ideals. So yeah, Stephen Bendel, Trump doesn't need Greenland, he needs a shrink. And Ed Manzini says, I'm so upset with the US. They elected Trump in the second term and put the world in a mess. They even gave a majority in the House and Senate so that there are no checks and balances to his power. Yeah, it is super frustrating. Who's popping? Don't forget Jemrick getting sacked before a big secret pre-planned public defection to reform in April before the locals had ruined it for them. Really interesting point there that Robert Jemrick, who was running for the head of the Conservative Party, has now defected. So he went to Kemi Badenoch, but he's the big Conservative Party player. He's defected to Reform today. ahead of schedule because they found out about it and they sacked him up front. The Reform UK is becoming the Conservative Party 2.0. Every Reform MP is a former Tory something, whether it's a mayor or an MP or a donor or whatever. Every single Reform MP is essentially a Conservative and all but name. And they are just becoming Conservative 2.0. And I wonder whether that will come back and bite them on the arse, as people said, well, we're voting for Reform because there's something different. And it turns out you're just voting for former Conservatives. Canada is cooperating with the Greenland Defence Coalition. That's crucial. Yes, so Canada is in there as well, and that's a very important point. Kevin Force, thank you very much, and Michael Vuchar for your superb support of the channel. You guys are just long-term supporters, and I really, really appreciate that. If you ever get a chance to go to Michael Vuchar's, I don't know if you can send me a link to your eBay shop. He sells Canadian retro stuff, and he sends me stuff. When you see me wear Canadian stuff, it's invariably because he sent it to me. So please, if you can post it to me, Michael, a link to your shop in general, I will throw that to peeps so they can go and support you, because you are a great supporter of the channel. A true invasion, says Cheryl Waitley. I never know if it's Waitley or Watley. A true invasion couldn't happen until summer. It's crucial that Europe gets established there first. That's a good point. Russian and Chinese ships are roaming around Alaska, not Greenland. I wonder why Trump don't get that they already neighbor Russia. It's only by 2.5 miles. Yeah, that's something I said the other day. Mitch Mazarol, we can be certain that Russian disinfo operations will be going full bore on pushing the US administration narrative in service of a divide and conquer strategy to weaken NATO. They are freaking loving it. Like I said earlier, absolutely loving it. From one Canadian to another, well, Canadian of Ukrainian descent, Mark Biscu, hey Mark, and Olena, the Robert Lansing Declaration of 1916, a legally binding under international law, is a formal US document recognizing Danish sovereignty over all of Greenland. How can Ukrainians trust Trump's guarantees in honor if he honors nothing? This is true. So actually, he's going against the already existing legally binding framework. If he were to invade, if he was to buy it off the Danish, actually the UK should get first dibs, and I think we should just search our pockets, look behind the sofa, get our coins together, and buy Greenland. If it is definitely going to be bought by the US, we should get in there first, and we'll say we'll look after you guys. But anyway, yeah, like how you can't trust Trump anyway. He's the most untrustworthy human being. I mean, he lies through his teeth every time he opens his mouth. He lies. But thank you, Mark. Really, really kind, as you always are. Putin puppet. The first EU-NATO priority should be directly to stop Russia, to avoid a battle on two fronts. Krasnov, so Trump again siding with Putin, Iran, Venezuela against NATO. Yeah, nothing I disagree with there. Seb Carter, thank you for gifting ATP Geopolitics memberships. Just a couple more before we'll finish off my content. Stephen Bendal, impeachment is the best solution to the Trump problem. I dream of stuff like that, Stephen. Will it ever happen? Almost certainly won't. He's Mr. Teflon. Nothing sticks on that guy. Trump wants Greenland because he heard there's a lot of ice. Oh, I see what you did there. I see what you did. And you can read that as ICE, the internal, border security people, or ICE, internal combustion engines. He wants oil. So yeah, it works in so many ways. You clever man. I'm not sure. Did everyone give Johnny P a thumb? I'm not sure. I don't know how to read that. Please, yeah, like, subscribe, and share, and all that. Yeah. So Praxis is very connected to Peter Thiel. Yes, Putin. Hopefully we got there in the end with that article. Stephen Bendal going along with that. I really hope Trump doesn't get any weird ideas about Iceland. Again, loving the puns. Everything he blames Ukraine. I hit my head against the wall every time he blames Ukraine. The wall has collapsed. Jonathan, what should I do? Says Lawrence Cox. Just, look after your head. Brain cells don't really come back very easily, if at all. So, look after that. Just use a lot of face palm emojis instead. Yeah, do that. Penguin 95, great support of the channel. Thanks, mate. When Corporations Rule the World, 1995, a book by David C. Corton, argued that multinational corporations had gained outsized power, undermining democracy, communities, and the environment. Playbook, yes. Yes, this is it. Oh, by the way, thanks, Cheryl. Cheryl says this is a great deep dive. Thank you. I was wondering whether I should read all those article excerpts out to you, but I really want this to be to give you a full understanding that kind of what X Penguin 95 is saying here. When corporations rule the world, this sounds like, if you want to go and see, it's quite old now, but there's a Canadian documentary called The Corporation, and it is one of the single greatest documentaries I've ever seen in my life. It is really very good. I remember watching it and just but probably, what was it? Was it 2003? It came out, something like that. Maybe later than that. But I remember watching it thinking, it's just an insanely good documentary. So I don't know if it still holds up. I'm pretty sure it does. It's the idea that in America, like, corporations have the rights of a human being legally, and as a result, all sorts of things go from there, and corporations then end up being able to do all sorts of bad. Anyway, thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks for a really interesting video, says Tomash. No, thank you for finding it interesting, because I do hope you do, because I hope that what I find interesting, you will. And sometimes I do worry. And sometimes I get an imposter syndrome where I make all these connections, and now I'm thinking, well, am I justified in believing that big tech is really behind this, and that this is going on and that's going on? And then when I read articles like that, I'm like, yeah, I freaking am justified in that. And thank you for vindicating me, because I do doubt myself very often, as we all should. But yeah, so thank you. I wonder how many terabytes are in Jonathan's brain. Sometimes I worry that I just read and learn new things and it pushes out old things. I'm a real Homer Simpson. My brain is I operate at about 85%, that's what I estimate, with multiple sclerosis. Like, I used to be able to rely on my brain to get up and debate people in public and stuff like that, and just be able to recall things really well. And now I have to go back and reread and redo stuff, and my brain is just not as good as it used to be. So I think it's about 85% of what it was. I struggled to hold multiple things. The other day when there were sounds going on in one of my lives, and my brain was really struggling, because it's called cognitive load, and my brain has been really affected by multiple sclerosis in terms of cognitive load. I'm unable to multitask in a way that I used to be. I mean, I still can fairly well, but just not at the level I was able to once upon a time. But anyway, right, let's get back on with where I was, and hopefully we'll take that idea of the big tech, and we're going to take it on into this, which is, I think, a natural segue. This is Robert Reich here, former Labour secretary for what's it, under Obama. US billionaires got an astounding $1.5 trillion richer in the first year of Trump's second term. So if you want to understand Trump as a leader in the United States, as a president, understand him by advocating for big tech, and advocating for billionaires, and advocating for all the rich, and not really bothering about the poor. So he's kind of, as a bit of an afterthought, he's trying to do a few things at the moment with regard to housing and with regard to this and that. But essentially, most of his policies are inflationary, and he doesn't really care about the average Joe. Now, that's mainly how he got voted in, is to deal with inflation and the cost of living. Biden said, hey, don't worry about these numbers over here. Don't worry about how you feel about how things are more expensive. Actually, our GDP numbers and these other numbers, these are really good. And there was this disconnect between, like, being geeky about the stats and the kind of economic reality from a macro point of view, to the lived experience of people finding things more expensive. And he got punished for that. And actually, Trump is doing that times 10. So it's really interesting. He's not learned from Biden, which is looking after people who are really struggling to get by. And as I said to you the other day, the GDP of the US is going less and less to the workers, and it's going more and more to people like this. So, and like, I keep saying these things to you, and then evidence comes out to completely confirm what I've been saying. So I talked about the 53.8% of GDP is going to US workers in terms of salaries and bonuses and blah, 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 blah. But that's less of a proportion than it used to be, and it's going down and down. And that shows you that actually you've got this jobless boom where you've got the corporations still making loads of money, but the workers are not seeing the benefits of that. They're losing their jobs to AI, they're losing their jobs to efficiencies, and they're not getting pay rises in accordance with the people at the top who are getting massive pay rises. You know, Elon Musk has just given himself $1 trillion, what was it? $1 trillion pay packet, and the board said, yeah. It's just absolutely obscene. So US billionaires got an astounding $1.5 trillion richer in the first year of Trump's second term. And I know I'm sounding like some kind of eat the rich leftist here, but actually at some point it gets unsustainable and it gets unfair to the point where something needs to happen. And if you're not careful, you'll have a revolution on your hands. You need to look after the working class, or the working class will protest. But then the question is, well, the working class are trying to protest in Iran at the moment, and if you have sufficient enough security systems, then you can, or security forces, you can clamp down on them enough. And then this connects to ICE. ICE is becoming, and there's now leaks that have taken place. There are some leaked documents to show that ICE in America have a remit that goes beyond ICE by quite a long margin, right? And they're starting to do things that are not icy. And the shooting of Nicole Renee Good the other day, she was shot 3 times in the face by an ICE agent for doing something that was, at most, if you agree it was anything, it was something that police needed to deal with, not ICE. And certainly not by shooting her 3 times in the face. And that he's done that, and he's been defended by everyone in the government. So you've got a situation where there are 6 times more ICE members of ICE in Minneapolis at the moment than Minneapolis police. Just understand what is actually happening. So you've got these quasi internal security services that are being funded to the tune of one of the biggest armed forces in the world. ICE have got massive funding. They're looking to get 10,000 more people to the tune of $30 billion. And they've already got an absolute ton of people, and they're being given immunity and impunity by Trump and his administration more and more. This is deeply, deeply concerning. All the while, the rich in the country are getting richer, and the poor are not feeling the benefits of this jobless economic boom. So remember, this is happening as they get even more tax cuts in exchange. So the big, beautiful bill then gives tax cuts that overwhelmingly benefit the rich and not the poor or not the middle class. So they get these massive tax cuts to rich in exchange for the social safety net being cut for everyone else. Meanwhile, the poor get Medicare and Medicaid taken away from them. They're not getting their pay rises. They're not getting their jobs even. And there's more statistics came out. There's another analysis I saw that this is the worst layoffs since, whenever. So is this the new golden economic age? Well, it is if you're super, super rich. Top 15 billionaires gained nearly $1 trillion in wealth in Trump's first year. The US has 935 billionaires, roughly a dozen of whom have jobs within the Trump administration. Last time I looked, there were 13 billionaires in the Trump administration. So who's he working on behalf of? Anyway, it's just so that finishes the kind of US stuff. I just want to just mention this because just to go to UK, because the UK government, and I feel like stand up for the Labour government in the UK because no one else does. I went to the pub with my mates a couple of weeks ago and I said, look, I'm no Labour Party member. I think I voted for them last. I vote for whoever is more likely to get in my constituency who isn't Conservative or Reform. So I don't really care who I vote for because it's first past the post and my vote never gets counted anyway. And in my particular constituency, no one other than Conservatives or Reform will ever get in, right? And so I might as well not vote. So I look at the trackers to who's most likely to be able to challenge those parties and I vote for them. So I think I voted for Labour last time, but I'm not sure I did, which says enough in itself, the fact I don't 100% know, because either Lib Dems or Labour here. I voted Green as well previously. And anyway, whatever. But I'm not like a champion for Labour, but I feel like I am needing to champion them now because no one else is. Because when you go online, everyone is against them because the algorithms are dictated by Elon Musk to absolutely denigrate Labour at every, or really the British government at any conceivable opportunity so that reform get in, so that, and we've joined the dots. Why do they want reform to get in? So that the EU, there's no chance of getting back in the EU. The EU is disunited, and you get tech deregulation, and the big tech companies, reform are their guys. And if it's not reform, conservatives are more likely to be their guys than, say, Labour or Lib Dems. And so I feel like I'm fighting against big tech by trying to kind of stand up for what the government is doing. Anyway, the government is maligned in ways that are often inaccurate. So you've had attacks of like crime statistics against Sadiq Khan in London, when actually the murder rate is the lowest it's been since bloody whenever. And then here we've got new figures have come out, and actually they've rejigged previous figures as well to show that that our economy is doing slightly better than we thought it was doing. So some better surprises, revisions in GDP numbers. Economy rebounded on a monthly figure in November, up 0.3%. I mean, it's not great. And it turned out that it didn't fall in September after revisions. On a 3-month figure, it's up slightly 0.1%, but the negative number last month was also revised away. Flattish, but not negative, and no recession. So every single month, I believe, since the Labour government took control, there's been no negative growth in GDP. I just think that's important to just think, hey, it's not all bad at the moment. It's not all absolutely freaking terrible in the UK, but we need to watch out for whether our sort of working class and middle class people are seeing benefit in the economic climate, just like in the United States. And I think big tech and AI are a huge challenge to any economy, no matter where you are in the world. So that is something to bear in mind. Right. Just to let you know that there's grifting. So I'm going to go back to the US here. So Elon Musk's AI company, remember, it just got into Pentagon. We had Pete Hegseth say, hey, we're going to have XAI help out with Palantir in the Pentagon. Whoop-de-doo. And then we have, insider trading. News Nation asks, there are reports that your husband bought stock in Elon Musk's AI company, which is not publicly traded, XAI, just days before a report surfaced that the Pentagon was expanding XAI's role in military systems. Can you assure us that your purchase wasn't based on the inside information? To which Representative Lisa McClain says, 100%, because if it was true, we would have bought 100,000 shares. We would have bought a heck of a lot more. It's like, okay, well, if it was true that I was insider trading and I knew about it, I would have bought even more than I did. So that's evidence I wasn't insider trading. I think that's a pretty poor argument, and it sounds very insider trading to me. There's lots of that going on in the United States, and it's super worrying. Now, I talked about visa freezing in 75 countries by the US earlier today in my hits and losses video, because it affects Russia as well. So Marco Rubio freezes all foreign visa processing indefinitely for 75 countries. And here are all the countries, including some that aren't like too controversial: Albania, Algeria, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Bosnia, Brazil, Ethiopia, Fiji, Gambia, Georgia, Ghana, Guatemala, Kuwait, Kosovo, Kazakhstan, Jordan, Iraq, Iran, Haiti, Guinea. Some of these you can understand. Yeah, Morocco, though, Montenegro, Pakistan, Nigeria, Congo, Rwanda, blah, 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 Thailand, Tunisia, Uruguay. Some of these countries, like, why are you not giving visa? Why are you not processing visas for these countries? And I said to you this morning, watch out. This is going to be a challenge for the US running hosting the World Cup. When you have World Cups, you have contingents from all nations supporting their clubs, and the footballers themselves, and the teams, and the medical teams, and the coaching teams. 75 nations. You're telling me Brazil aren't in the World Cup, yet you're not. You're freezing visa processing for nearly half of the world's countries, and you're the main host of the 2026 World Cup. What the hell is going on there? Oh, interesting. And someone else saying, sorry, who's popping, saying the Brazilians are not happy with that, by the way. Interesting. Okay. It just seems absolutely incredible, that, just like shooting yourselves in the foot. I bet FIFA are now regretting giving the World Cup to the US. Now, I talked about this previously. Check this out. Like, Donald Trump literally fell asleep in the Oval Office yet again, when there were loads of people around him.
Bipartisan issue and understand.
Let's have a look at this.
So hard on this. Peter Welsh, it is a bipartisan issue, and understanding where we are in this country and how important the health of certainly our children are is so important. So hard.
Now, this person says Donald Trump falls asleep and breaks wind in front of two young girls. Now, there was a bit of a expulsion of air there. It sounded like a sigh just before she turns around. But there is this rumor that Trump, because he's got, you know, he's well known to be very smelly, supposedly wears this adult diaper, and that's been evidenced by looking at his trousers and whatnot. People like Adam Kinzinger's like, yeah, he really, really smells. I can tell you firsthand. And you get these claims like came out from the Ford people in Detroit telling the Lincoln Project the other day that he really smelt going around a Ford factory, and then breaking wind here. You know, should I be talking about this? Well, you know, I don't have a problem with denigrating Trump in any way these days. He's a horrible human being, but like falling asleep again is an old man that is, I think, easily manipulatable. You can take advantage of him, as Putin has routinely, as I think big tech have. And he's just falling asleep in public, breaking winds, and just like, is this the guy that should be running the United States of America? What is going on there? And then he comes out with absolute garbage like this.
The things that are absolutely essential for bone development and for teeth. But as a neurosurgeon, the thing I really like is with the brain, what it does for the brain. You know, the brain starts to develop right after conception and adds millions of neurons every single day. Continues to do that right up until the mid to late 20s. Now, it's important what that brain is getting during the development. Is it getting soda or is it getting milk?
So milk would help your cognitive ability.
Absolutely. You can tell who's been
Take a
drinking milk.
cognitive test. I've taken a lot of them. I've aced every one of them because I drink milk.
It's good for it, and it shows.
Do you consider that?
It's the things that are absolutely essential.
Just babbling on about drinking milk and that helps his cognitive function. I mean, it does have that effect. I mean, just reading here, milk and dairy products are linked to better cognitive function, with some studies showing moderate intake supports memory and reduces decline, possibly due to nutrients like protein, vitamins, and anti-inflammatory compounds, though results vary by dairy type, population, and study design, with some research suggesting potential negative associations with milk alone in certain contexts. So maybe some caveats there, but you know, Trump going, I've aced 3 cognitive tests. Why have you taken 3? Why have they made you take 3 tests? It's because you've got dementia or there's something wrong with you. And so, yeah, I aced it all because I drink milk. And then he falls asleep and breaks wind. Yeah, gee whiz. Just a bit more meat on a bone. The other day I said the Department of Labour came out with yet another tweet that appeared to be drawing from Nazi wording. So this happened 2 days in a row with the US Department of Labor, and I was like, this has to be more than coincidence. They've 2 days in a row they said something which is lifted from Nazi verbiage, it seems. And then you had the Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security standing at the lectern with words that appeared to be referencing Nazi wording as well. And you're like, this is more than a coincidence. So the US Department for Labor said, America is for Americans, embrace Americanism. So America is for Americans. It was very similar to Germany. Germany is for Germans, which was said by Joseph Goebbels. It turns out that Hitler said America is for Americans himself. He said, Frankreich den Franzosen, England den Engländern, Amerika den Amerikanern, und Deutschland den Deutschen. So he himself said America is for Americans, as well as France is for French, England is for the English, America is for Americans, and Germany is for the Germans. And okay, like either you know he said that and you're trolling, or which is just as bad as just, well, you believe this. Either you believe this and you're lifting it from Germany in the 1930s, or you believe this and you're not lifting it from them, but you're converging and you're sort of functionally at the same place. So this is just super, super worrying. Yes, we're seeing so much of this. And why? Because Stephen Miller is at heart of the Trump administration. He's an actual fascist. Well, actually, people are now openly saying this. I've been saying this for how long? Basically the best part of a year, that Stephen Miller is actually the president. You've heard me say that loads of times. Here's a Guardian article saying Stephen Miller wants us to fear him by Awa Mahdawi. Stephen Miller is a shadow president, says Mike Levin. While Trump blusters, Miller designs the machinery. Mass deportations, attacks on birthright citizenship, the ideological purges dressed up as policy, and even Trump aides call him the prime minister. He is called the prime minister by Trump aides. An unelected zealot driving an extremist agenda is profoundly dangerous for a democracy. That is what's going on. So mark my words, that is a guy that is running the show. And when you understand what's going on with Trump's approach to Ukraine or to whatever, Stephen Miller is probably somewhere in there. Now, we mentioned Iran. I'm just going to finish on Iran. The US has imposed today new sanctions on Iran for its brutal crackdown on protests, according to the Treasury Department. Trump administration has announced sanctions against 18 Iranian officials. The restrictions also include shadow banking networks through which Iran laundered billions of dollars from oil exports. Now, I said to you in my video on Iran this morning that, because I was saying to you on the socials last night that watch out, Iran, I think they're going to feel some American heat tonight. I think they're going to do a bombing run. And then apparently the Americans pulled out last minute and they were going to bomb Iran or do some kind of military strikes. And they ended up not doing it last minute. Was a little bit more of a confirmation of the. So I said there were two reasons. One, the people around Trump were not too happy. Some of maybe the military advisors saying, well, it's not really sure that striking here is going to help protests because these are kind of internal security forces. I don't know whether military strikes are going to work for that. How does that work? Blah, blah, blah. But I said another thing that apparently was working were on them were the Turks and the Saudis and the Qataris saying, if you use our air bases to do these strikes, we will not permit you to use our air base to do these strikes. So then you've heard that an American carrier group, I think, is back on the way to the area. I presume if they're going to do strikes on Iran, they're going to have to do them from carriers rather than from their Qatari bases and from Saudi Arabia and from elsewhere. So it looks like actually international otherwise allies of the US have said, no, we don't want you striking Iran and we're not going to be helping you to do that. Anyway, Lindsey Graham tonight has basically confirmed that. So Lindsey Graham's this hawk that would like the US to bomb pretty much everywhere, although he's been a bit quiet on Greenland, thankfully. Lindsey Graham says, all the headlines suggesting that our so-called Arab allies have intervened on behalf of Iran to avoid decisive military action by President Trump are beyond disturbing. The Ayatollah's regime has American blood on its hands. They are slaughtering people in the streets. If it is accurate that the Arab response is action is not necessary against Iran, given this current outrageous slaughter of innocent people, then there will be dramatic rethinking on my part regarding the nature of the alliances now and in the future. Now, this is Lindsey Graham reacting to probably news stories that Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Turkey have not been helping. But I assume he's going to have some kind of access to intelligence, or he'll have some contacts that would confirm that. He is railing against those countries and saying we're going to have to rethink our allies. Well, look, if you're rethinking your allies in the Middle East and you're not happy with Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and who else did I say? Turkey, and you're going to pull out from bases there, and you're starting to piss off the Europeans, and so you're going to have to pull out from NATO bases in the US. Where are you going to have friends? Like, just massive isolation. Anyway, I just thought that was an interesting statement there from Lindsey Graham. Anyway, that's enough from me. I've gone on for too long. I do really appreciate your viewership today and putting up with me banging on incessantly about this stuff. Just the TLDR for today is the Europe-US divergence is largely underwritten by tech and tech regulation. And that's what's going on. There's a battle for the future of the world, and it was a war for the future of the world, and it's a war being waged by the tech industry against democracy. The question is, who will be able to stand up to the tech industry? Because at the moment they seem to have the American government in their pocket. The tech industry got Trump. Elon Musk said the other day, he said true to a tweet that said, if it wasn't for Elon Musk's Twitter, Trump wouldn't have become president. And he said true. So he knows he got Trump to presidency, right? The tech industry have the Trump administration in the palm of their hands, and they're using the Trump administration to project their power into Europe. Europe is the last significant enough democracy or set of democracies to stand up to the tech industry. Interestingly, Brazil did, or at least they stood up to Elon Musk, but that was Elon Musk alone. And Musk capitulated and allowed them to have access and to regulate Twitter. He stood up, but the UK government has forced Musk to capitulate. But I don't know that there was much change in what Musk's grok was doing anyway, in stepping down to the pressures of the UK government. But that is where the fight is at the moment, and the US government is really just fighting on behalf of the tech industry. They have their own agenda, as Trump will have his own agenda as well. But mark my words, he is fighting on behalf of the tech industry too. Right, so that's enough for me. I really do appreciate your support. Just the final thanks to you guys who have been amazing. Thank you to Joe Hales. There are several houses. I'm not quite sure. Have to get a grip on this clown. Grow some balls, USA. So I think the Senate and the House of Representatives do need to get a grip on holding him to account. And it was really good to hear Don Bacon stand up and say, look, if he invades Greenland, he's got more chance of being impeached. There will be Republicans. But why does it take invading a NATO nation, a NATO ally, for people to actually start standing up and shouting about these crazy times? I don't know. It's frustrating. Thank you to David L for gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. I really, really appreciate that. And Please Feed Me Poop says, your thoughts on reports the entire US administration is suffering from internal bleeding in preparation for Greenland attack. Your thoughts on reports that the entire US administration is suffering from internal bleeding. I don't know about this, but I have heard, and I had this lined up, but I didn't talk about it. I took it away. Essentially, the Heritage Foundation, which is what underwrites the American, it controls the American, it is the American administration. The Heritage Foundation their authors wrote Project 2025, which is the Trump blueprint. It turns out that due to some pretty horrific things that have recently happened, I think possibly including Greenland, you've had an exodus of people from the Heritage Foundation who were your more quintessential conservative Republicans, and some of them have gone to Mike Pence, who's a former vice president, who is a genuine old school conservative, and they've gone to his kind of organization. Don't know what it is. So there is a bleeding from the Heritage Foundation, which was worthy of reporting, and I didn't report on it. I should have done. But yeah, thank you for that. Please feed me poo. I don't know about that happening in other places. We know the DOJ. The problem with people leaving the DOJ, so in Minneapolis, they're killing over good. There have been a lot of people who have quit the DOJ, both in Minneapolis and more, I think, further afield. The problem there is these are the people you want in the DOJ, principled people who are not going to do the bidding. But Pam Bondi said that 6 people came to her to say they were going to quit, and she fired them on the spot so that they couldn't quit, like the Attorney General. So, like, the problem is you then don't have those people in DOJ, and then you replace them with people who will do what you want. And effectively, the more you purge, whether they leave on their own accord or are purged, the more you get willing departments that don't act as checks and balances anymore. So that would be entirely worrying if that is happening on a wide scale basis. Right, what do we have here? Grunge thing. Ronnie says Wikipedia is going to work with the AIs of Meta and Microsoft. I'm not sure if that's a good thing now. Oh dear. Yes. So I don't know. I have time to go into many more questions and comments, but thank you for appreciating the stream, Heidi High. Great chat. Thanks to the mods. Thanks to the people who support the channel. Please remember the atpgeo.com/donate. That's still open. We are still helping Car for Ukraine, but I need to formalize that with regard to getting a patch going. I need to speak to JR again. Thank you to all of you guys for being so amazing in the live chats. Thank you for helping out the channel and for supporting the work I do here. I'm trying to get out what I think is the truth. But I'm also striving to justify my opinions when I do have opinions, so that I'm not just some kind of centre-left bloke whinging on, that I'm actually justified. So even if you do sit at the opposite end of the political spectrum to me, you can see that I'm not just being ideologically one-sided and single-minded. There was a really interesting chat between Jessica Tarlov from the Raging Moderates. She's on Fox News on the 5. She's the only liberal on the 5, and she's just interviewed Sarah Longwell from the Bulwark. Really interesting discussion at the end of that I was going to show you today, but go and check it out, where they talk about how the present Republican Party vis-a-vis like Trumpism, Trump MAGA party is no longer the Republican Party. It's actually a third party now. Trump has turned the GOP into like the old independents that used to not vote because they didn't like the GOP, and they don't think of independents as people who are swing voting between the two. There's a whole group of independents who never used to vote because they thought both parties sucked. They wanted some kind of weird extreme party. They've got that with Trump's Republican Party. So it's now no longer the Republican Party. It is this third party extreme thing where Trump is this independent. He's not a Republican. He's an independent. He is their independent, and he's captured this. And it's still nominally under the GOP, but really it's this third party. And I think there are probably many good Republicans out there. Hopefully, some of you still watching this who are like, you feel you have no home anymore because Trump has taken that party into this new place. And you had Donald Trump Jr. the other day saying we're no longer the GOP, with a MAGA party. Yeah, I would completely agree with that. And I think same with the Conservatives in the UK. Like, I feel sorry for old school Conservatives, King Raccoon, because you're left with the Conservative Party trying to be reform, to try and beat reform at their own game, to try and keep the voters from leaking to reform. And you have people like Rory Stewart as an old school Conservative saying, well, I don't have One Nation Conservatives don't have a home anymore in the Conservative Party. So the same sort of things happen in the UK, but I just think it's quite it's sad. Anyway, Gerdes needs to hear this. Yeah. I think if you support the Trump party in any way, it's indefensible now. It's indefensible. You have to vote Dem, even if you're not aligned with much of their politics. If you don't vote Dem in the next elections, in the midterms, you are paving the way for pure authoritarianism. It is honestly, it's at that point in the United States. And that's what I feel about Labour. Funnily enough, I feel that about Labour, actually. That's kind of why I'm kind of fighting their corner at the moment. It's because I think it's that same kind of calculation that you want to hope that Labour succeed in the UK now, because they've broadly become a centrist party. If they don't succeed, you've got Reform getting in who will be authoritarianism 101. And that's what's going on in the US. And I think, vote Dems, because Trump will become an emperor. He wants it. And big tech, I'd hope the Dems are strong enough to stand up to big tech. I'm not even sure of that anymore, because there's a lot of corporate Dems there, but they're the only chance in the two-party system. If you keep voting GOP going forward, then you are just facilitating power grab by people who I think do not deserve power. It's really, really worrying. Anyway, I must go. I must leave. Take care, everybody. I need a cup of tea, maybe something a bit stronger. I did a shop today, and I bought a couple of an online shop delivered to supermarket shop, and I got some Pinot Noirs, which is a bit naughty of me, but because I do like a red wine, a Pinot Noir particularly, and I'm quite excited. So I might have a glass of wine tonight and just think, maybe just to have escapism. We just finished watching 5 series of Slow Horses on Apple TV, and I cannot. I boycotted Paramount Plus, as I told you. I boycotted that because of CBS. And that's how strongly I feel about American politics. I boycotted that on CBS, but then I was like, well, I now boycott that. I might as well take on Apple TV. Anyway, let's just go now to Apple TV, and there's some amazing, it's honestly some brilliant stuff on there. Everything we watch has been brilliant. Slow Horses is one of the greatest series I've ever watched. I love it. Gary Oldman, it's a UK spy thing, but it's dark humor. It's deeply funny. It's really well acted, brilliantly scripted. It's brilliant. Slow Horses. Down Cemetery Road was brilliant. We watched Hijack, Idris Elba. That was great escapism. And now we're watching what was it, The Far Frontier, The Last Frontier or something. Anyway, it's all good stuff. So I'm going to have a glass of wine and watch some TV. Take care, everybody. Come and join me tomorrow in my live where I'm going to be interviewed talking about whether Moses existed or not. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, that's on my other channel. Take care. Thank you to Benny Pie and all the mods and everyone. You're amazing.